Chapter 15, Part 2. After they discovered the room full of boats, Lena had come home to Mrs. Murdo's with the sound of the river still in her ears. It was like a huge, powerful voice roaring at the top of its lungs. Deep inside herself, Lena felt an answering call, as if she too contained a drop of the same power. She would ride on the river. She could hardly believe it, and it might take her to the shining city she had dreamed of, or it might drown her. What she had imagined before the smooth, gently sloping path leading out now seemed childish. How could the way into the new world be so easy? She dreaded going on the river, but she was ready for it too. She longed to go. She slept that night in the beautiful blue-green room in the big, lumpy bed with Poppy next to her. She felt safe here. Mrs. Murdo came in and tucked the covers around her. She sat on the edge of the bed and sang an odd little song to Poppy. Something about rock-a-bye baby in the treetops? What are treetops? Lena asked, but Mrs. Murdo didn't know. It's a very old song, she said. It's probably nonsense words. She said goodnight and went out into the living room where Lena could hear her humming quietly as she tidied up. She was so orderly. She never left her stockings draped over the back of a chair or her sewing spread out all over the table. Lena closed her eyes and waited for sleep. But her thoughts kept tumbling around. So much was going to happen tomorrow. The whole city would be in the uproar. People would stream down into the pipeworks to see the boats. They'd be excited, shouting and laughing and crying and packing up their belongings and surging through the streets. If they couldn't all fit into the boats, there would be fights. Some people might get hurt. It was going to be a mess. She'd have to keep her little family close around her. Poppy, Mrs. Murdo, and Dune, and perhaps Dune's father, and Clary. Through it all, she would hold tight to Poppy so no harm would come to her. It seemed she had barely closed her eyes when she felt Poppy's hard little heels banging against her shins. Time to get up, Poppy chirped. She got out of bed and dressed herself and Poppy. In the kitchen, Mrs. Murdo was mashing potatoes for breakfast. How lovely, Lena thought, to have breakfast cooked for her, to hear her bubbling in the pot, and to find a bowl and a spoon set on the table, and vitamins lined up neatly beside a cupped beet tea. I could live here forever, Lena thought, before she remembered that in a day or two they would all be leaving. There was a sudden banging on the front door. Mrs. Murdo dried her hands and went to answer it, but before she'd taken 3 steps, the banging came again. I'm coming, Mrs. Murdo cried. When she opened the door, there was Dune. His face was flushed, and he was breathing hard. He had a bulging pillowcase slung over his shoulder. He looked past Mrs. Murdo to Lena. I have to talk to you, he said, right now. But he threw a doubtful glance at Mrs. Murdo. Lena scrambled up from the table. In here, she said, towing him toward the blue-green room. When she had closed the door, Dune told her what had happened. They'll come for you too, he said, any minute. We have to get out of here. We have to hide from them. Lena could hardly make sense of what he was saying. They were in trouble? Her legs went shaky at the knees. Hide? She said. Hide where? We could go to the school. No one would be there today, or the library. It's almost always open, even on holidays. He hopped on impatiently from foot to foot. But we have to go fast. We have to go now. They have signs up about us all over the city. Signs? Telling people to report us if they see us. Lena felt as if a swarm of insects were inside her head, buzzing so loudly she couldn't think. How long do we have to hide? All day? I don't know. We don't have time to think about it. Lena, they could be outside this door this minute. The urgency in his voice convinced her. On the way through the living room, she gave Poppy a quick kiss and called, Bye, Mrs. Murdo. We have some emergency work to do. If anyone comes asking for me, say I'll be back later. They were down the stairs before Mrs. Murdo could ask any questions. Once in the street, they ran. Where to? Lena said. The school, Dune answered. They took Greystone Street, staying within the shadows as much as they could. As they passed the shoe shop, Lena saw a white piece of paper stuck up on the window. She glanced at it and her heart gave a wild jump. Her name and Dune's were written on the back on it in big black letters. Dune Harrow and Lena Mayfleet wanted for spreading vicious rumors. If you see them, report the mayor's chief guard. Believe nothing they say. Reward. She snatched the poster off the window, crumpled it up, and tossed it into the nearest trash can. In the next block, she tore down two more, and June ripped one off a lamppost. But there were too many to get them all, and they didn't have time to waste. They ran faster. On this holiday, people slept late, and because the stores were closed, the streets were nearly empty. Still, they took a long route all the way out by the beehives to avoid Sparks Swallow Square, where a few people might be standing around talking. They ran past the greenhouses and up Deadlock Street. As they crossed Night Street, Lena glanced to her left. 2 blocks away, a couple of guards were crossing to Greengate Square. She tapped June's shoulder and pointed. He saw and they ran faster. They had they been noticed? Lena thought not. They would have heard a shout if the guards had seen them. They got to the school and went in through the back door. In the wide hallway, their footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. It was strange to be here again, and to be here alone without the clatter and chatter of other children. The hallway with its 8 doors seemed smaller to Lena than it had when she was a student and shabbier. The planks of the floor were scuffed gray, and there was a cloud of finger smudges around the doorknob of every door. They went into Mrs. Thorne's room and out of habit sat in their old desk. I don't think they'll look for us here, said June. If they do, we can crawl into the paper cabinet. He set his pack down next to him on the floor. For a while, they just sat there, getting their breath back. They hadn't turned the light on, so the room was dim. The only light came from beneath the blind over the window. Those posters, Lena said after a while. Yes, everyone will see them. What will they do to us if they catch us? I don't know. Something to keep us from telling what we know. Put us in prison room, maybe? Lena ran her finger along the B carved on the desktop. It felt like a very long time since she had last sat at this desk. We can't hide in here forever, she said. No, just until it's time for the singing. Then when everyone is gathered in Harkin Square, we'll go and tell about the boats and the mayor, won't we? I haven't really thought about it. I haven't had a chance to think at all this morning. But the guards were always there at the singing, standing next to the mayor, said Lena. They'd grab us as soon as we opened our mouths. Dune's eyebrows came together in a dark line. You're right. So what will we do? It was like finding yourself on a dead-end street, Lena thought. There was no way out. She stared blankly at the things that had once been her daily companions, the teacher's desk, the stacks of papers, the book of the city of Ember on its special shelf. The old words ran through her head. There is no place but Ember. Ember is the only light in the dark world. She knew how that wasn't true. There was some place else, the place where the boats would take them. As if Dune had read her thoughts, he looked up. We could go. Go where? He said. She said, though she knew right away what he meant. Wherever the river leads, he said. He gestured to the pillowcase sack. I packed up my bag this morning. I'm all ready. I'm sure I have enough for you, too. Lena felt her heart shrink a little. Go by yourselves? Without telling anyone? We will tell them. Dune was on his feet now. He went to the cabinet and got a sheet of paper. We'll write a note explaining everything, a note to someone we trust, someone who will believe us. But I can't just leave, said Lena. How could I leave Poppy and not even say goodbye to her? Not know where I'm going or if I'm ever coming back? How could you go without saying goodbye to your father? Because, said Dune, once they find the boats, the rest of Ember will follow us. It's not as if they're leaving them forever. He strode across the room and rummaged to Mrs. Thorne's desk. Who shall we write the message to? Lena wasn't sure about this idea, but she couldn't at the moment think of a better one. So she said, we could write it to Clary. She's seen the instructions. She'll believe what we say. And she lives close by, just up in Toric Square. Okay, said Dune. He pulled a pencil from the desk drawer. Really, he said, this is a perfect idea. We can get away from the guards and leave our message behind us. And we can be the first ones to arrive in the new city. We should be the first because we discovered the way. Well, that's true, Lena thought for a minute. How long do you think it will take before the rest of them find the boats and come? It's a lot of people to get organized. She numbered on her fingers the things that would have to happen. Clary will have to get the head of the pipeworks to go down with her and find the boats. Then she'll have to make the announcement to the city. Then everyone in Ember will have to pack up their things, troop down to the river, get all their boats out of the big room, and load themselves in it. It could be a big mess, Dune. Poppy will need me. She pictured frenzied crowds of people and Poppy tiny and lost among them. Poppy has Mrs. Murdo, said Dune. She'll be fine. Really, Mrs. Murdo is very organized. It was true. The thought of taking Poppy with her on the river, which had darted into Lena's mind, darted out again. I'm only being selfish, she thought. To want to have her with me. It's too dangerous to take her. Mrs. Murder will bring her in a day or two. This seemed to be most sensible plan, though it made her so sad that it cast a shadow over the thrill of going to the new city. What if something goes wrong, she said. Nothing will go wrong. It's a good plan, Lena. We'll be there ahead of everyone else. We can welcome them when they come. We can show them around. Dune was bursting with eagerness. His eyes shone and he jiggled up and down. Well, all right, said Lena. Let's write our message then. Dune wrote for a long time, and when he had finished, he showed what he'd written to Lena. He'd explained how to find the rock with the E and how to go down to the boat room, even how to use the candles. It's good, she said. Now we have to deliver it. She paused a moment to see if she had courage inside her. She found that she did, along with sadness and fear and excitement. I'll deliver it, she said. I'm the messenger, after all. I know back ways to go where no one else will see me. And an idea struck her. Dune, maybe Clary will come home. Will be home. Maybe she could keep it safe and help us tell what we know, and we won't have to leave right now. Dune quickly shook his head. I doubt it, he said. She's probably with her singing group, getting ready. You'll just have to leave the note under their door. Lena could tell from his tone of voice that Dune didn't really want Clary to be home. She's supposed to be as he she's supposed he had his heart set on their going down the river by themselves. Dune glanced up at the clock on the schoolroom wall. It's a little after 2, he said. The singing begins at 3. After that, everyone will be in Harkin Square and the streets will be empty. I think we can get to the pipeworks safely then. Why don't we leave about a quarter after 3? You still have the key? Dune nodded. So after I've delivered the note to Clary, I'll come back here, said Lena. Yes, and then we'll wait until 3:15, and then we'll go. Lena got up from the cramped desk and went to the window. She moved the blind a little and peered out. There was no one in the street. The dusty schoolroom was very quiet. She thought about Dune's father, who would be frantic when he saw his son's name on those posters, and then realized later that Dune had disappeared. She thought about Mrs. Murdo, who might have already seen the posters and who would be frightened if guards came looking for Lena and terrified if Lena didn't come home by nightfall. She tried not to think about Poppy at all. She couldn't bear it. Give me the note, she said to Dune at the last. She folded the piece of paper and carefully put it in her pocket of her pants. Back soon, she said, and went out the room and down the hall to the rear door of the school. Dune went to the window and watched her go. He moved the blind aside just enough to see out on Pibb Street. There she was, running with that long-legged way, with her hair flying. She started across Stone Grit Lane. Just before she reached the other side, Dune's breath stopped in his throat. 2 guards rounded the corner from Knack Street, directly ahead of her. One of them was the chief guard. He leapt forward and shouted so loudly Dune could hear him plainly through the glass. That's her! Get her! Lena reversed her direction in an instant. She raced back down Pibb Street, turned down School Street toward Bilbolia Street, and vanished from Dune's sight. The guards ran after her, shouting. Dune watched, sick with horror. She's much faster than they are, he told himself. She'll lose them. She knows places to hide. He stood frozen next to the window, hardly breathing. They won't catch her, he thought. I'm sure they won't catch her.